What's good, DWA fam? This is Jared. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at donewithadultingpod.
Hey y'all, and if you're new here, welcome to the family. My name is Asia.
My name is Jared, and thank you for listening to
Done with Adulting Podcast. We are really glad you're here because we're talking all things we have to do as adults that no one warned us about during the many years we were in school.
Yes, we also discuss pop culture, current events, and give our perspective on hot topic issues in our society. And even though we're best friends, we don't always agree.
Basically, we're millennials. We get it. Adulting is hard. Welcome to your safe space.
We hope you enjoy.
All right, we are back.
Back at it again.
Another week, and
How you doing?
I totally fucked up last week. We were supposed to do our Pride content for the entire month of June, but in pure adulting fashion, I fucked up our schedule. So
You're not supposed to tell the listeners that, but
I mean, it's the real thing.
that's adulting, right? You overbook.
It's
You
real.
double book sometimes. That could be a job for, well, that is a job for
It is a
people.
job.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I'm getting to the point where I need an assistant, but I'm not that important. But one day I will have an assistant that'll keep track of our schedule.
Goal in life, right?
But
Have an assistant.
yes, that is my goal. But as a result, what we're just going to do is we're going to do our same Pride content. We're just going to extend Pride into July, which
It shouldn't be just a month anyway.
shouldn't be
so.
just a month anyways.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. We'll catch back up.
Just like Black History Month, it's more than a month.
Exactly. So anyways, very excited about our guest today. We won't waste any more time because we spent so much time dealing with Mercury and out of retrograde or whatever is happening.
Technical difficulties.
I know. And yeah, whatever. Anyways, we're not going to waste time. Like I said, we are very excited because our guest today is a very good old dear friend of mine. And, you know, we've got the Stonehill connection back pseudo in a way. So yeah, her name is Whitney Edwards. She is currently the head coach for St. Rose Women's Basketball out of Albany, New York. Shout out to the NE10 League.
NE10 is out here. I meet
So
people all the time and they're like, they just start shouting out the NE10. It's crazy.
So anyways, we're so excited to talk to you today, Whit, and welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here. Appreciate the call and definitely looking forward to this conversation. I know how y'all do, so I know I'm in great company.
It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be good. So let's just start by just give us a little bit more background about yourself, the listeners. Obviously, you and I are close friends, so I know all the things. But yeah, just give us a little background.
Yes. So as our lovely host mentioned, I am a current head women's basketball coach at the Division II level. I've been coaching in college for now 11 years, which is crazy. This was just my first year as a head coach. I chose to embark on that journey, all up in COVID. So getting a lot of lessons and learning things the hard way and by doing. But I come to this wonderful place. I'm originally from Mount Vernon, New York, which is about 2 hours south of Albany, money earning. Shares a hometown with Denzel Washington and Heavy D, to name a couple.
I didn't know that, actually.
Neither did I.
You got to drop the fun facts.
Yeah.
That is a fun fact.
Those are some big names, too.
Denzel? Have you ever seen him, around?
Not for a while.
Oh, okay.
But we're a little connected through people.
Okay. No, Black people, we know each other.
Exactly. You only need that little bit of connection. But yes, that is what brings me here. Excited to be here as well. And let's get into it.
Let's get into it. That's the other thing before we get into it is the fact that you started your head coaching journey in a pandemic, because you guys didn't actually play. NE10 canceled. So this has nothing to do with our topic, but but I feel like it's a good adulting thing to talk about of just like, that's a pretty big, it's not like coaching isn't like your regular 9 to 5 job, you know, it's like totally different. So it just seems like one of those jobs that's like, of all the jobs not to, like, COVID could really fuck up, this is the one.
It's altered everything.
I've had some time to reflect on just how much it did that. But, you know, I'm still here smiling. It was definitely a hell of a year. If I could do it again, I don't know that I would do it that way. But it gave me some solid lessons along the way. So I'll take it. I'll take it.
Did you play college ball, or like, what's your background in regards to ball in general?
Yeah, great question. I played at University of New Hampshire for 4 years. I was a point guard there. So that was from 2003 to 2007. I am dating myself. But yes, I did play college ball. I feel it every day now when I wake up, and I didn't do anything the day before. I just stood up out of bed.
Same.
Feel it in the knees.
Exactly.
Literally
the
same.
bottoms of your feet. Yeah. It's the bottoms of your feet.
Well, yeah, the bottoms of your, yes. Mine are my knees and the foot that I broke. Anyways, okay, so that was really great background because I want to circle back to like the basketball thing during our conversation too.
Yep.
But one of like the main thing we really want to talk about today in honor of Pride Month is really this idea of just like intersectionality as a whole. And we talk about on this podcast, obviously, a lot of issues that Black people face, whether it's in adulting or whatever the situation may be. We like to bring the Black perspective to the conversation on this podcast specifically. But I think like one thing that definitely is hard. I feel like it's harder for people to understand, like just this idea of like the Black Lives Matter movement popped off. Like right before that, Pride was still like pretty big. And I do want to talk a little bit about like performative Pride Month participation.
Allyship, performative allyship.
Yeah, but I say that because if you could speak to this a little bit of just like your perspective of just the idea that there's no like, you can't support BLM and not support Pride. Like this is how I try to explain it to people. Like because of this idea of intersectionality, it's just not possible. You can't say you support one and not the other, like like genuinely. So I would just love to hear like just your perspective, because one of the things I remember, and this is like an old story memory of like, this is gonna really, I don't even know if you remember saying this to me. But when Whitney was my coach at Stonehill for a year, that's how we first met. I was a senior or a junior, can't remember. But afterwards, you know, we became friends. But when I was at school, I was in study hall one day, and you came in to study hall and we were just like talking. It wasn't just us two, there were other people there. And we were just talking about like life and succeeding and just like stuff. You were just dropping the leadership knowledge, you know? And one of the things you said, which like I still remember to this day because it stood out to me, was like, when you get out into the world, right? Like being a woman out in the real world is like, you're already starting like one step behind, right? You're also a Black woman, so you're starting another step behind. And then the third thing you said was like, if you are a gay Black woman in society, like it's almost the most adverse situation that you could be put in. And you didn't choose any of those things. That's just who you are. So I would just love to hear your perspective on the idea of intersectionality and as a whole and your experience with it and how it kind of shows up for you too, like on a day-to-day. I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny what you remember as a student athlete as well. And no, I don't remember that, but it sounds on brand. So yes, we definitely had that conversation. You know, as far as the topic goes now, I love that this is what we're hitting on, because for me, it's been something that's been newly found in terms of like how deep this goes. I know how many boxes I'm checking. You know, when I walk into a place, I definitely have, you know, being a queer Black woman, it definitely is something that I've learned to appreciate more than not hiding it, but just sort of not fully embodying what that means. Mm-hmm. So I think to really encompass it is just about how I show up authentically. That's what it is for me at this point. How I connect with people by being myself. One is not more important than the other. One facet of me doesn't just show up in the room, as I mentioned, they all come along. So when it comes to the professional workspace and trying to figure out how to navigate, how to work with coworkers, what's appropriate. That's been the piece for me in the last probably 2 to 3 years that I've tried to make a lot more sense of and learn more about, to be totally honest. I don't know all there is to know about intersectionality. I'm still coming into the full knowledge of what it really is. And I've started to read and listen a lot more to people like Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a part of Policy Forum. She's done a lot of the background work to really define what it is to be intersectional, and what it is to truly learn and understand. So when I think of intersectionality, it's about embracing my privilege and really the areas where people like me have been marginalized. I think it's about really just recognizing how all of those things work together, and really how to make space for the other, that, Black trans people. What is it like for them to show up?
Right.
I'm really big on just trying to amplify voices that are even more marginalized than myself, because similar to that conversation you bring up, that's what I've always thought. I'm in the worst position. I'm the lowest on the totem pole, and that's not really true. Like I said, I do have places where I've been marginalized, as a Black queer woman, but I also have to recognize the privilege that I have in the other avenues as well.
For sure. So I guess at what point in life did you actually start realizing that this played a role in your life? Were you already an adult? Were you a little bit younger? Can you kind of give us that timeline?
I'm going to say 2017.
You get the date specifically.
Full adult. Yes, and a really, specific experience. This was actually during working back at my alma mater, through some conversations and things that were going on at that time on campus. I became a lot more aware of just the importance of the voice. But how can I have a voice if I'm still learning for myself what it truly means? But again, I think 4 years removed from that point, I'm a lot further along in that journey to figure out just what it actually means. But it's definitely taken some time, and it'll continue to.
You mentioned you don't feel at the time, maybe you said that thinking you were the lowest on the totem pole, which now you know that you're not. That's obviously we could think of a more, nicer phrase than that, but we're just going to use that. But what I wanted to ask you was in your opinion, in our country, America, our society, who is the lowest on the totem pole? Is it trans Black women in your perspective?
To that point, you're absolutely right, and I want to find
a better way to say
that.
It's okay though. We're raw
in
here.
The spirit of what we're talking about,
I know.
That's exactly what we're trying to, root out.
You're right.
So I do think Black trans women have a much harder time. One, because in a lot of ways, I think, and again, I'm going based off of what I've seen or been exposed to. I think you have to try to hide a little bit, coming out is a thing, as a Black queer woman, I can come out and maybe that'll be welcomed and accepted. But for that Black trans woman, you are trying to move through that space in a totally different way. It's almost better to be hidden because you won't be a target for something.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's absolutely dangerous. And you see last summer too, just the names of women that were killed. Even during this time we're going through social unrest, you still have Black trans women being murdered at a very high rate.
But no one to me is talking about it. I know that the high rate is happening, but it's not on our feeds. It's not on our, wherever you get your news from. It's nowhere.
I feel like actually it was.
No, but not at the, not as much as it's happening.
Oh, no. It definitely can happen more, but I think the awareness and the knowledge of these individuals being killed because of who they actually are, it was getting out there last year when it was at the height of it.
Yeah, I just mean
at the height. Similar
to how we don't see every Black person assaulted or killed by police come through our feed. And I say feed because I have this.
That's where the news is coming from.
I just feel like that's where most people get their news. I don't agree with it, but that's just what it is.
Nobody's watching just like Channel 5 anymore. They're getting the news from social media and things like that.
So
some of it could be skewed, but
I say that to say, like, we don't see all the Black people that are assaulted by specifically police in our feed, but we know that the numbers are high. And so what I'm saying is I've maybe once seen a movement for, I'm not even going to lie, I can't even think of something that I saw on Instagram or any type of feed that had to do with a specific like in the BLM movement, it's like Breonna Taylor or whatever, we have the hashtags. Like, I can't think of a Black trans woman specifically or any Black trans
that name
person
sticks with you.
Yeah,
I think
I could even name a hashtag for.
Yeah, it's in the news and it's right out the next day because
I don't think it's in the news.
That group is so marginalized that it's kind of like in one ear and out the other. That's what
and
it
this
seems
is
like,
the
which is
part
terrible.
about, having that kind of identity. It's the same thing. I mean, it goes across a lot of boundaries. I've been taking or at least participating in more trans education programs, and they'll ask a question like, do you have any gay members on your team? Right? And most people can answer that question with a solid yes or no. Do you have any trans folks on your team? People are like, I don't even know. I'm not sure. Probably not. So there is a lot that's hidden, where if you haven't created the context that has made it comfortable for those people to come in and join you, you're probably not going to know. You don't have that relationship or that insight, or you don't have that environment set up, you're probably not going to receive people into it, not as easily as you would, the other letters of the LGBTQ Q community.
Okay.
But that's why I think, African American Policy Forum and the WNBA last season was so important, because they highlighted Say Her Name. And the list of women that they were actually recognizing, some of those women were trans women. You don't know that unless you look those women up. But that's the first place and platform really that those are really broadcast across, a growing market where a lot of people had to pay attention.
And I feel like also as like BLM was growing, a lot of people did start saying like Black trans lives matter and trying to distinguish the two versus just being straight BLM.
Exactly. And I think that's how it gets, talked about and discussed. It's not something that is often a topic, So you do have to really look for it. You have to engage in it in a very intentional way, or it could be, it's very easy to miss because people want you to miss it.
Okay, so this question I've been thinking about for a while, and the reason that I want to ask it is because, a lot of obviously tried to like educate people about the Black experience by calling out maybe something that would be different for something that happened to Jared and I versus like somebody else who's not Black. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically was, I think, and Jared, if you want to speak to your upbringing as well, you can. But in my Black family, like the LGBTQ community, like I didn't know anything about, let's just say I didn't really know anything about it until I got to college and was like having college experiences. I just have this like idea or perception that I feel like Black culture in general isn't as open or receptive, to the LGBTQ community, or maybe members of their family who come out as part of the community or anything. And I say that from my experience of like literally having people in my family who I know are gay, not because I'm assuming they're gay, but like they've been living with the same roommate, that's what the family calls their roommate, for literally 25 years. And you're just like, this is clearly it's your partner. So
they're still like, roommates. Jeez.
Why are we doing this? Like, why don't we just be open about it?
Much. Yeah, rent ain't that much.
To Asia's point, like at least for my family, it would be like the family would have friends of the family who were gay, but if there was somebody within the family, it would be a whole different type of issue. And it's just kind of like it contradicts itself.
Yeah, so
Like,
I would.
it's okay for them.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's okay for them, not okay for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would just love to hear like your perspective or perhaps your experience with that, because I know your family is blackity black just like the rest of us. And so I've always wondered like if you feel like that is a difference between our cultures, like specifically with our culture.
I mean, I can definitely say in my own household, there wasn't a lot of conversation. I think a lot of Black families, I know my Black family, you have like that gay uncle or cousin. There's always someone,
Yeah.
you know, and we're tolerant, but we don't talk about it.
Exactly.
And, you know, I don't, of course, like I had family who told jokes, say all types of inappropriate things. And it's taken very lightly. But we never really had serious conversations about identity or about sexuality, never in that way. So even as I came, maybe I'll share my coming out story with you guys, which I haven't really told a lot of people about. But when I had to really think about how that looked, I still had nervousness, even knowing like my mom and my sister are two of my biggest supporters and people I'm extremely close to. Like my aunts, I grew up around most of my family is in Mount Vernon. So I've always been supported in the things that I've done, but I was still super fearful of how to actually say that. And maybe even they knew a little bit, but it's still very different to confirm it.
Sure.
You know, I've always dated guys. I've always had boyfriends, girlfriends, and to be honest, if I had all of this framing when I was younger, it would have been a lot easier.
Sure.
I'm like, oh, y'all have a name for this? I can comfortably date more than one person as long as we talk about it. So, you know, it was definitely tricky because everything gets so embedded. And even in your most comfortable space, you know, I question like how comfortable was I because I wasn't really showing up as the full me.
Yeah, the true, like your true self. Exactly. I hope that one day we're actually able to get to a point where like coming out doesn't have to be a thing. And I don't know if that'll be in our generation or in our lifetime, but I'm hopeful that eventually one day it'll just be normal.
Yeah.
It is.
I don't even want to say normal.
So much undoing though. It's so much unteaching.
Unlearning,
that has to happen and unlearning, to get to that point because from day one, gender reveals. You didn't even hit Earth yet. You are pink or you're blue. So
yeah, the social norms.
Exactly. There's so much norming, and by the time you come into your own, where you're really learning yourself, learning your true identity, and how connected you are to it, or how averse you are to it, it's a lot to have to navigate.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm even thinking like so I want to kind of shift to sports specifically because tell me his name. The football player.
Yeah.
Carl Nassib.
There's a football player who just, he just came out like yesterday.
The other day.
2 days
and
ago.
Jared sent it to me. He's like, oh my God, we're just about to talk to Whitney. Like, this is crazy.
Yesterday.
But I wanted to, because I feel like this idea of sport, right? And this was like another reason why I feel like you were such a great guest for this topic is because as we all know, we are all former athletes. Sport is a great way to bring people together from different backgrounds and go for a common goal. So it's a really great, even in the, even with race and,
camaraderie brings everybody together.
Yeah. Socioeconomic, everything.
Yes. But at the same time, I think what we don't always talk about with sport, because the whole goal of sport is to win the championship. So that's like all people talk about, and not necessarily like the people who are playing to win, is like how the norms of a sport could like hinder or hold somebody back in revealing or even understanding what their identity is. I think like football is a really good example because it's like super masculine. And so like, as this guy just coming out as openly gay, we know he's not the first gay person to ever play football, but he's the first person that is saying it openly that currently is in the NFL and whatever. And on the flip side of that, women's basketball specifically is the opposite. It's like, if you play women's basketball, you are automatically labeled as gay. So I would love to hear just your
people are surprised when there's like women who actually have
who aren't gay.
Yeah, who are straight.
Yeah.
In the WNBA or just college basketball.
Yes, because we only like each other on our team.
Like, that must be what's happening.
It has to be.
So I would love to just hear your perspective on that, maybe your experience and now, and even from a coaching standpoint versus when you were a player. Are there differences now? Like, do you feel like we've even come a little bit, or is it still very much like are athletes, young athletes these days, still very much going through like those same things?
Yeah, that's a fully loaded question right there. I mean, to the first point, it's very different than it was when I was a player.
Okay.
Like there was fear around just being gay or bi or lesbian in college when I went to college.
Even on your
People
team, like within your team setting.
within our team, people hid. Of course, you might find out or you might assume because you would see, like you're around each other a lot.
Right.
But there were people who came out in their own time over the course of 4 years, but it wasn't an automatic off the rip. You know, what I experience now with players, they're very open as far as their orientation goes around, like I said, gay, lesbian, bi.
Right.
You are more likely to hear those, orientations come out. But I mean, when I fast forward now, it's hard. You have to be, again, very intentional about how you create your environment.
Right.
Because there is a mixture of identities that are there. They're going to show up. And for me personally, I have to make space for all of them or as many as possible. It's tricky. And like I said, I'm still like coming to how you make it welcoming for all. But it is not something that I think is really openly talked about. The NCAA has had trans legislation for, I want to say, about 10 years now. So they've had these documents, they've had policies anyway that they've created that are supposed to guide, how athletic departments operate.
Really?
But it's not exactly. It's
specifically to this topic?
Well, the
10
trans.
years. And, websites like transathlete.com are becoming bigger or becoming, more notable where people can actually go access information. I actually have I can show you this picture, but I know the crowd can't see it, but I'll make sure you get that.
Yeah, send us the link.
That's just for the states that have passed legislation against trans athletes competing.
Oh, can you send us that link?
I'm assuming the red is the ones that are against it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this was just this is 2021, May of 2021. So since that time, from my understanding, I think 3 more states have changed to red. It's something that's very, very ongoing. It's still building, but the most amplified conversation is taking place right now.
If you send us that link, we can put it in the show notes. Jared, what do you, like, as someone who played football, what Whitney just said is, in order for us to, like, change that, we have to be, like, coaches have to be mindful of the environment they're creating on their team, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like in football, it's like a no. Like, there's not, like, coaches wouldn't even have the courage to.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask that because I'm like, at least when we were in school and I'm imagining before us, like, coaches really weren't talking about mental health or
at all,
even sexuality. And I know that's probably a huge topic now that coaches now have to touch on and now need to make their team feel as comfortable as possible. So I think I was going to ask you, is that something that I guess you're trying to put into the way that you coach and how you try to make the culture for your team?
Definitely am. And again, you have to maneuver it, and it's all based in how you how it sits with you. If that's something that's important and you're going to prioritize it, then it will happen. Mm-hmm. If it's a conversation that you feel like you have the tools to have, you're more likely to have it. But you have to look at it structurally, top down. Is your athletic director supporting you doing that? Are they pushing for it? Are they providing the resources, or are they providing, the people to come in and actually have those conversations? Are they providing trainings? So there's a lot organizationally that also has to shift, but in the immediate moment, it's still important that coaches educate themselves that these players are out there. Do you want to have them as members of your team? And if you are, then they have to come as they are. They can't come and hide. Last year too, there was a player who was on Fordham women's basketball team actually, who decided to forego this year as their 5th year and basically, came out, quote unquote, as being trans. So I don't want to put their information out there,
Sure.
but I thought it was a great story. It's definitely something that people can look up because to me, that's a trend that's going to start happening.
Yeah. And to Asia, to your point, like in football, you never heard, like, we don't talk about that. At least in my locker room, we didn't. The only time we ever touched on a topic like this or sexuality as a whole was maybe, I think it was my junior year. It was the last home game of the season, and one of the players, his dad, I guess, was trans. So, or actually, his dad was a trans woman. Am I saying that properly? I don't.
We're still working on our terminology practice.
So his dad.
Break it down.
Yeah, his dad was a trans woman, and the last game is the senior day. You walk down with your parents. So he got up into the front of the whole team and told basically his story, and wanted to make sure that everybody on the team respected him and his family as they walked down. And that was really my first time actually ever like hearing about it, kind of, at least within football or within the locker room. And then we thought it was kind of a joke at the time, but we found out that he was like dead serious. And then we went to the game.
Wow.
The next day, his dad walked down with him, and it was just all respect because of who he was. He was part of the team. It's like, at the end of the day, we're all a team. We're all a family. Like, that doesn't really matter to us.
That's nice to hear because I have a very different thought of like what a football locker room is like.
Oh, I mean, there's probably definitely folks who behind his back were making jokes or laughing, things like that. But when he came down to it and in front of everything that he could see,
right,
it was all love and respect. And I think that's where we're getting to a better point in life now, where obviously it will be love and respect in front of his face, but now there wouldn't be that chatter behind his back.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
And that's the hard part. That's the part about intersectionality, though, is how can you pick and choose which one you're going to support? And I think that's what, Asia was getting at earlier. How do you get to decide? That's a very slippery slope to go down. Like, okay, well, I'll support, the G's, but I'm not really messing with the L's over here.
Dave Chappelle.
How does that work? And again, like, as you learn more, as you open your eyes to it, it's really not that confusing.
Yeah.
And we do more harm to not learn about it because the people who it impacts, they're fine with who they are. They're okay with it. The only question they have is when people, cast us out. That's the piece where now you start to question who you are when you know who you are because you feel it. It's when it's not matching what the other people's expectation is of you.
Yeah, I feel like similar to like the issue of racism is like you said about, to me, the solution for that is like teaching the next generation and the next generation, the next generation. And I say that because even like similar to race and how like older white people maybe aren't really open to this idea of, Black people living our lives. One of my like family friend just graduated from college and like texted us a picture of their graduation, and they in the picture they basically came out and kind of told their story of like, I look a lot different in my pictures, this is why, these are my pronouns, et cetera, et cetera. And for like my like aunts and mom, like immediately everyone's like, not that they feel any type of way about it, but the first immediate reaction to them is like, well, what do I say? Like, it's just confusion. Yeah. It's like,
you don't want to offend?
Yeah, because what she was saying is I prefer she or they series pronouns, either or. So to them, they're like, well, what does that mean? Like, why is it either? You know what I mean? And I'm trying to break it down, and I have a good understanding. I could certainly keep educating myself, but I could feel their discomfort, not because of who she was saying she was, but because they didn't have the knowledge or confidence. Like when they see this person again next time, they're not going to know how to act or what to say because they're not educated on what it means, basically.
Correct.
So that was like the moment where it really kind of set in for me as like, okay, it's not that, because I've always had this notion of like, because there's no conversation in my family, because there was no like talk about sexuality in my family ever, I've had this notion that they don't agree or they don't support that community when, and in that moment it was kind of like, well, that's not necessarily true. You just don't understand.
Yeah. They're ignorant to it.
Correct. And then, but to see people engage in learning, that is a form of support.
Sure.
It's like, you don't have to do this whole dance, but I'm just asking like, hey, maybe read an article. It's the same thing when you're trying to learn about racism or systematic racism. You're trying to learn, like,
I know, it's the same.
To me, if you frame it that way, it's the same.
Yeah, so
it's when everyone's like, well, it's not plural, it's singular. I'm like, we're not doing an English lesson right now about they, them pronouns.
Do you think it's tiring to them, just like it's tiring to Black people where like we're not the ones to educate you, you need to educate yourself? Do you think, I mean, I feel like their fight is kind of just starting.
By they, do you mean trans people specifically, or do you mean the community as a whole?
Well, trans but I think even if you change your pronouns, does it make you trans? Right?
Correct.
You could be, non-conforming or non-binary or, something like that. So that community as a whole.
Is a lot.
Yeah. Do you think
it's a lot? It's
tiring to them like it is to Black people who, when white people come up to us like, oh, can you teach me like how not to be racist? We're like, no, you can do your own research to do that. Do you think, I know their fight is just starting, but I can see them getting tired of that already.
Well, this fight has been generational as well for the trans community because they've been here. They've been here. The people who started the gay liberation were trans women. So they've been here, but they got shunned and pushed to the back of the line.
See, that's
but I do think that it is tiring. And allyship is allyship across the board, but it doesn't make sense to continue to marginalize one portion or one group just because it doesn't fit what we've been learning. And I think, again, it's easy to say that gay and lesbian are cool now. We crossed this threshold and now that's all welcome. But there's still also gay, lesbian, and bisexual people who outcast trans people.
Sure.
So it happens within the community as well. There is just a larger level of learning that has to happen, I think, for everyone to understand. It's about the harm that you're doing to not be inclusive. Like, don't ask someone, are you, you're transitioning? Does that mean like you're having surgery? Like, these are really rude questions to ask people. and it's traumatizing.
Right.
And I think for me, I've just learned that because I've also encountered and interacted with more trans people in the last 3 years of my life than I ever have. So again, if you're not getting that exposure, if you're not around those people or in their community or entering their spaces, you're not really going to be privy to that struggle because you're not in it. You're not a part of it in a lot of ways. And it's easy to not see.
Yeah.
Facts.
So you may not know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And I'm actually really asking for our future dad here.
Congrats!
Thank you.
I literally say that on every episode because it's a podcast community, baby. So like a lot of the things we say on the podcast about like how white people or any non-Black person can teach the next generation, teach their children, how to really love everybody and blah, 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 is to not let the first time they see a Black person be when they get to college and like things like that. Right. So I'm just wondering, like, for parents, like young parents, like millennial parents, and I know you don't have any children yet, but you've worked with so many children, not just in your family, but outside, like in your work. That's not the solution I feel like for the LGBTQ community, because it's not something you wear on your skin, right? Like, so my question to you is, what is the best way to like nurture the next generation or like teach the next generation about having these conversations and being open and that type of stuff and like really loving everyone the way they are, but also recognizing that our differences, all that stuff without necessarily, like, we can't say like bring them to the LGBTQ neighborhood. Like we would say, bring your kid to a Black neighborhood and go to eat or something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my question is like, what can parents do for their kids now to sort of like help support like having these types of open conversations?
First and foremost, I think parents need to check themselves. Like, you have to check your own insecurities or ignorance around all topics. You're going to give your kid what you feel you either didn't have. I feel like that's a lot of places people start. I didn't have this, so I want to give my kid this. Or you're going to give them the things that you're most comfortable and well-versed in. So again, I think to have the most natural and authentic experience with that, like, if the more you know, the more you can impart in some ways.
That makes sense.
Books are a really great resource. Let them go read things. As they're learning, you do your little bedtime stories. Think about the types of books that you're exposing them to, even at that age. I know one thing in the last year that my fiance and I have done, like, when we give gifts, like, we're giving books that we look at biracial children, children of color. We have a gender identity book that we just got. We have a they, them pronoun, very little, like, comic guide that we keep in our bathroom. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And even with my niece, she's 10 years old now.
Crazy.
I let her read those things anytime she's around us. And she is so fascinated by it. And she just goes through them very quickly, whether it's just a picture book or something. But you'll be surprised, I think, at what they take interest in when they're not pushed or told not to do something. It's a natural thing that happens.
Yeah. And to your point, I think also now they're doing, like, cartoons with, like, same-sex couples, same-sex main character.
Representation, baby.
Representation matters.
It matters.
That's what a lot of people are showing now.
We never even thought of that. We're like, we didn't even know what we were missing.
I know.
It's like all of the, like, they're redoing Rugrats. People are upset about Rugrats.
Oh yeah, the mother of the twins,
Howard.
yeah, is remarried to a woman, right?
Yeah, I think I saw something. They were like, if you actually watched the show, you could, like, tell that she was actually a lesbian or something. That's what I saw.
Living as that repressed lesbian woman again, because, like, as these kids come up, these generations come up, the best thing we can do is encourage and empower. They are more removed from the fear that's attached to the things that we had to worry about. So again, like, my players having their experience in college right now is so different than my experience in college. And it's good. It should be that way. That means things are moving. But the fear that our parents had, they can't believe that we're willing to leave a good job that had benefits. Like, but I don't even like that job.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because there's more to it than, like, the backbreaking grind that they had to go through. So, everything starts to change. It opens up. I just think parents have to be very careful about not projecting their insecurities and the things that they don't know, their ignorance, onto their kids, because that's when it gets perpetuated.
That's a gem. Write that note down. Just kidding.
It's all gonna come through. It happens in coaching. It happens in coaching too. Like, I see it all the time. When you have people losing their minds, going, yes, your players will drive you there, but that's some of you inside too. It is.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think I have another question in regards to Pride Month. Do you think it's, like, commercialized now with, like, I guess, businesses just trying to be performative versus actually caring and putting their money where their mouth is, or just their allyship?
I tried to find, there was a meme on Instagram where it had, like, these 4 companies.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And they all had changed their logos, but they all fund, like, Republican campaigns that, like, specifically,
like anti-LGBTQ.
Yeah, anti-LGBTQ organizations. So, like, what the fuck?
Unreal. And it's absolutely performative, and capitalism has its traps.
Yeah.
I definitely have my Air Force Ones with my rainbow flag from last year's Pride collection. I do, because, I love a good shoe. But
however,
it's extremely performative. What I would like to do is actually compare last summer's allyship and posting and social media engagement compared to this year, side by side with companies, because I haven't seen the same like push on social media this summer as there was last year. Last year was the most I can remember, I mean, in my lifetime, around corporate participation.
I think that's because everybody was in the house and eyes were focused on it, versus now outside's opening back up and people are worried about other things now, so they could slide under that radar.
Exactly. And is it Olympic year? Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But there's definitely a lot of smoke and mirrors with it. And to your point, I don't know how many people actually dig to see what these companies are about.
That's what I'm saying.
I actually did go look at where Nike was donating before I made my purchase. So,
but you were intentional about that.
Absolutely. But you have to look, because there's a lot of that now. I mean, support of Black lives as well as with that, where people are just kind of performing for the moment and they're not putting their dollars where those tweets are. Like, so it is.
Remember when everybody posted a black square on Instagram? Like, what has happened since then?
I cannot even, my
whole timeline.
My stomach turns thinking about that day. I was literally like, what the actual fuck is going on? Which reminds me about Juneteenth. I know we're talking about LGBT.
Let's celebrate it all. It's a great
Come on.
Right,
I was just saying to Jared, I'm like, it's pretty wild to even just say out loud that Juneteenth is a federal holiday. So, I mean, definitely, sure, mark it as progress. However, like, also so much a pacifier. It's just like, it also annoyed me. It almost annoyed me. I was like, so now you want to make this a federal holiday out of nowhere when you've done nothing else, and now white people get the day off work. And they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Not on Juneteenth, okay?
No. And what about the businesses that, because it was a Saturday, didn't give off Friday? Like, did they do that for the 4th? I need this worked out. If it falls on the weekend, I need Friday or Monday. Yeah,
it came too quick. It came too quick. Even my job was like, it's a little too last minute for us to give you the day off in the email. And then they were like, however, with that said, please feel free to take a few hours today to celebrate how you see fit. I'm like, taking the whole day. I'm off.
All 8 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, that's another one. I just hope with Juneteenth, we continue to use it to learn what we haven't learned. I know for me, last year was the first year I even really knew what it meant. And I hope it doesn't become Memorial Day. You know, where now it's about something's on sale and you get an extra day at the end of the weekend. You know, the holidays that we even celebrate, how much of the root do we know? I mean, I just learned about what Watch Night was listening to a podcast the other day.
Watch Night?
Watch Night for New Year's Eve.
Never heard of it.
It's a real thing. Religion, they do it in church. That people go on New Year's Eve, they go to Watch Night service, and they roll the new year in. And
what?
Oh, my mom goes to church on New Year's Eve.
You gotta go look it up. The root of it, though, is apparently we were waiting to see if freedom really happened. And I think it was the day that rolled into when boys would basically be sent to work. Like, they could actually be drafted to go work. And their families might not see them for a year. So what does New Year's Eve now look like?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
You know? You talk about like
so
why people make black eyed peas and greens and why we cook what we cook. There's a root to that.
Yeah, that's what I learned.
It's like turn up. That ball's gonna drop. That like it's just a late night to be up and go get some VIP love or something. But
so much of history and tradition has just been lost or changed.
Yeah, rewritten.
Whitewashed.
Rewritten. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've taken up a lot of your time today, but I would love to kind of ask you as sort of like a wrap-up question, what if you could, say one last thing to the listeners about Pride Month, about allyship towards the LGBTQ community, about intersectionality, any of these things, what would you want to say? What's your final message? I think like our listeners specifically are coming from a place where we're all very much like learning about allyship and the best ways to show up in that way. So yeah, any sort of like end of the yoga class, last minute things.
Yeah, I would say One, thank you for having this type of conversation. And we did cover a lot of different aspects, but that is intersectionality. So one, not taking that part for granted. Those things are all included for a reason. And I think just as people move forward, I guess be comfortable enough with your ignorance that you're willing to go learn a little more. Like, it's okay to be ignorant, but not long term and forever.
Yeah.
You know, it is a choice after a certain point.
That's
so
me right now.
It's just making
learning.
sure that people just, it's okay to be there, but you don't have to stay there. There's nothing wrong with owning that there's things that you don't know. I think we've had a veil pulled over our eyes for all of our lifetimes. There's no shame in that, but I think there is shame in continuing to stay still where you are. There's no excuse at this point. So just making sure that people do their part in whatever way that feels true to them. That's what's important. You can't really do this type of work on yourself or with other people if you really don't have ownership over, again, your own ignorance and your own place in that spectrum. So I'm just encouraging people, keep learning, keep connecting, see people as human. Like, we all got shit.
Right.
And again, like, it's just about continuing to learn and grow. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm committed to that. 2 master's degrees deep. Never thought I'd be here. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with continuing the journey.
Facts.
Wow, this has been a really great conversation.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you.
Very much.
I appreciate y'all.
Don't want it to end.
And shout out and congrats to you too, just for continuing to build what you're building. I just appreciate all folks, but definitely Black folks. I know a little bit about where y'all have come from, but you know, to be doing the work that you're doing and finding a way to really amplify what you're doing is important. So I support y'all. I would have worn my sweatshirt, but it's hot.
It's hot. Yeah, we got to do a summer drop.
I got my Done with Adulting merch.
Go
cop that if you haven't already listened.
Where can people find you on the socials, on the interwebs, wherever they can connect with you that you feel comfortable? And we'll also put it in the show notes.
Yes, but best place would definitely be on Twitter, at Coach E_St. Rose is where you can find me.
All right.
Lots of good stuff. I'll get better on my social, but you know.
No, good luck next season.
Like,
yeah. Yeah, no, literally.
Good luck next season. When you come up to Stonehill, I don't know if we'll be rooting for you. Well, we'll rooting for you, but we might be rooting against you as well.
We'll be there.
But
it'll be your first season in IRL. First season, really. Right?
We had 7 games that we're just gonna, put on a shelf.
Practice.
Scrimmage.
Yeah.
Practice round. But yeah, we're coming through. I'm like, we'll be at one of those 2, Bentley or Stonehill, I'm sure.
Oof, I don't know if we can go to Bentley. Just kidding. I'm over it. We're over it. It's fine. All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. You all know what to do if you like this episode and this podcast. Go ahead and click subscribe so you don't miss anything. Scroll down, leave us a rating and a review, and we will put all of the articles we talked about today, the website that Whitney talked about, and her Twitter information in the show notes of this episode.
Yes, make sure you follow us on Insta, Done with Adulting Pod. Also on Twitter, Done WTH Adulting.
Bet. Thanks, Whit.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.